हरिः ओम् सर्वेभ्यः नमो नमः। अद्य आगतेभ्यः विशिष्टातिथिभ्यः अपि स्वागतं व्याहृत्य I'll continue the proceeding in English since today's lecture would be in English. The Center for Avadhānam has been established to revive the golden age of Avadhānam, to become a center of excellence for the promotion, patronage, and performance of this unique performance art form. We aim to re-energize the study of Kavya, Sahitya, Purana, and Itihasa, create a resurgence in the culture and arts of a past era, and create avenues for intradisciplinary and interdisciplinary avenues of research in the process of learning and literary creativity. This center will also encourage research in the field of cognitive studies pertaining to the feats of memory, literary creativity, and multitasking performed by an Avadhānī at ease under a stressful situation with multiple yet simultaneous challenges. Today's lecture is the second in our series, which is titled as the monthly lecture series. We do this every month, coinciding with the Pūrṇimā tithi of that month. And it is indeed our privilege that in today's session, we will be having a very renowned scholar of Sanskrit and the Darshanas, Dr. Sampadananda Mishra ji, who will be speaking on the topic Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, the power of retention. Before we go into the program, we would like to bring the blessings of the Almighty and ask for a nirvighna parisamapti of this lecture today. For that, I invite Kumari Sri Lakshmi Iyer, a 5th semester student of our BA Sanskrit program. Kumari Sri Lakshmi, over to you.
Marakadaveena Paninidayini Marakadaveena Paninidayini Varadayini Swaraveni Kalapani Varadayini Swaraveni Kalapani Saramati Devi Saraswati Taraka Brahma Swarupamati Yuvati Saramati Devi Vadyamritankalaya Tala Shruti Dayini Vadyamritankalaya Tala Shruti Dayini Madhyama Gantara Panchama Vasini Vadyamritankalaya Tala Shruti Dayini Madhyama Gandhara Panchama Vasini Pankajalochani Padmani Vasini Pankajalochani Padmani Vasini Pankajalochani Padmani Vasini Mangaladayini Mama Gridvasini Mangaladayini Mama Gridvasini Saramati Devi Saraswati Taraka Brahma Swarupamati Yuvati Saramati Devi Saraswati
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. It gave us the much needed auspicious start to the second talk of the monthly lecture series. Dhara and Dharana are two core requirements of Avadhanam. The concepts of memory, intelligence, and retention are closely interlinked. Says the Amarakosha, Dhir Dharanavati Medha. Dhāraṇāsāmarthya is the mind's power of retention, and all those who practice the art of Avadhāna have a great power of retention. This has been the foundation of India's great oral tradition, which preserved the scriptures as in their pristine purity. In spiritual practice, this is the power of sustaining the full stream of force of Ananda, of widening knowledge and being mind, prana, and body. In today's lecture, we shall be exposed to the what and how of everything to do with the power of retention. Before we proceed to the lecture, I would like to introduce to you all today's reputed guest who would be speaking on the said topic. Dr. Sampadananda Mishra has founded and launched the first ever 24 hours Sanskrit radio called Divyavani Sanskrit Radio, and he is single-handedly managing the entire content since its inception in 2013. In the year 2014, Dr. Mishra founded the Samskrita Bala Sahitya Parishad with the aim of creating, evaluating, and propagating children's literature in Sanskrit. He is passionate about Sanskrit and strongly believes that Sanskrit has immense potentiality to elevate the human consciousness to sublime heights. Dr. Mishra has spoken at various conferences, seminars, and literary and religious festivals, both nationally and internationally, on Sanskrit, Indian culture, yoga, and education. Dr. Mishra is working now as a professor at the Rashtram School of Public Leadership, Rishihood University, Sonipat. Among the numerous awards that he is adorned with, the Government of India has conferred the President's Award, Maharshi Badarayana Vyasa Samman, in the year 2011 for his outstanding contribution to Sanskrit. In the year 2014, the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, conferred the Senior Fellowship Award to Dr. Mishra for carrying out his research on the Vedic art of multiple concentration. In the year 2017, Junior Chamber International, India, conferred the Literary Excellence Award on Dr. Mishra for his contribution to Sanskrit language and literature. He was conferred the Kendriya Sahitya Akademi Bala Puraskar in 2018 for his book Shanai Shanehi, a book of rhyming songs in Sanskrit for children. He was also conferred the Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Recognition of Re-Engineering India 2020 by the Rethink India organization. With these few words, sir, I open the session to you. Kindly enlighten us on the said topic, and we are eager and looking forward to your presentation. Welcome, sir.
Namaskar and Dhanyavad. So let me begin with a little invocation. Om Agajanana Padmarkam Gajanana Maharnisham Anekadantam Bhaktanam Ekadantam Upasmahe. He Vibhu Ananda Sindhu Mecha Medha Diyatam Yaccha Duritam Dinabandhu Taccha Dure Niyatam. yacca duritam dīnabandho tacca dure niyatam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. My heartfelt gratitude to the Center of Avadhānam, Chinmay Vishwavidyapit, and Indic Academy for inviting me to speak on this topic, Dharanasamarthya, the power of retention. "25 years before, I just had passed out from Pondicherry University under the guidance of Professor Kutumba Shastri. I did my MPhil, and then, knowing that I'm spiritually inclined, so he suggested me to settle in Pondicherry in the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, and then carry out some works related to Sanskrit and Bharatiya Sanskriti. So it happened in 1995 that I settled in Pondicherry, and 5 years later, so just maybe 20 years before, for the first time I experienced an Avadhan performance which we had organized in Pondicherry. Durbal Prabhakar Sharmaji was the Avadhānī, and Raghunathacharya ji, who was the vice chancellor of that time in Tirupati Vidyapit, so he was the president of the Avadhānam. Though I had heard about Avadhānam as a student, little introduction to what Avadhānam was, but I had never experienced Avadhānam. That was my first experience to see how Avadhānam happens. Before the Avadhan, just listening to what an Avadhanam is, it was impossible to believe that such things exist, that such thing can happen. Even like me, many others who have experienced Avadhanam, or whenever you see an Avadhanam, after seeing also it becomes difficult to believe that such things happen. It's an unbelievable feat which India has preserved till date, right from the Vedic period. Of course, it had its own evolutionary journey. It took different shapes. It had its own ages, the Prachina Yuga, the Madhya Yuga, the Navya Yuga of Avadhanam. But it is at the same time sad that such a great tradition has lost its presence in its own land. And thanks to initiatives like IGNCA, initiatives that Indic Academy has taken in establishing this center, that a revival of this art would take place, and the revival of this tradition, the Avadhan tradition, definitely would contribute immensely towards the preservation and promotion of the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, Now in Avadhanam, when we look at, when there are Ramakrishna ji himself is an Avadhānī, there are many others who will be watching also, must be acquainted with the Avadhanam. It's a display of many creative aspects, display of many different powers of the human mind. The creative power, the power of imagination, the power of poetry, the power of memory, the power of concentration. Human consciousness has such faculties which humanity needs to manifest it. And in Avadhanis, a great amount of the inner faculties are manifest. And for the manifestation of that, and for the activation of that, and then bringing it to the day-to-day life, whether in the manner of performing Avadhanam, or for one's own swadhyaya, or for one's own, daily life, implementing it in various aspects of life, it needs a tremendous sadhana, tremendous discipline. Without discipline, it will not happen. So there are various aspects connected with Avadhanam. So one can talk about the creative power, one can talk about the poetry, the whole gamut of poetry and the poetic ability. One can talk about the power of concentration. One can talk about the power of language. One can talk about the power of imagination. One can talk about various other aspects connected with the single feat called Avadhanam. Now, many people, when you talk in India, have hardly even heard about what Avadhanam is. It's limited. The knowledge of Avadhanam is limited to very few people. Even in the Sanskrit tradition, many Sanskrit students and scholars and professors and enthusiasts have hardly heard about Avadhanam. The word Avadhāna is also not a familiar word. When I talk about Avadhanam, then I tell people, have you heard the word Avadhāna? No. I said, you have heard, you know it, but you do not know that the word Avadhan is present in that word. Every Indian knows the word Savadhana. Savadhana contains the word Avadhana, but because of our mechanical understanding, we hardly pay attention to the different components of the word. So Avadhanam in a way is an integral part of our daily life. Almost every day, we must be using the word Savadhana, and we must be remaining Savadhana in many cases, whether I'm cooking, whether I'm driving, whether I'm doing anything. Savadhanata is very much necessary. We do practice a little bit of Avadhanam in our daily life without being conscious of it. This unconscious mechanical practice, when it turns to a conscious activity, it helps immensely, and that becomes an art where one becomes capable of, one attains to that skill, that meticulousness, one becomes capable of performing that feat which seems impossible to many. But it's very much there. We know, we practice it, we do it. And Avadhanam, when we study it deeply, is very, very different from multitasking. There are many people who can multitask. So it is by giving a little introduction to this whole art, I will then turn to the focused topic and the significance of it, the Dharanasamarthya, which is a very important component of Avadhānam. Now, there are many people who do practice and then who have attained to certain skill of multitasking, but they will not be called Avadhānis. You all must have seen, for example, you all must have seen, there are tribal ladies, there are many people who carry so many pots on their head, walking on the rough roads of village. There will be a baby hanging in front, and their belongings are hanging on the back side. There are so many pots filled in with different things they're carrying without holding it, and their hands are busy stitching something, and they will be walking and talking with the fellow worker. How many different activities they do and how skillfully they do. Also, you must have seen Vanshanartanas. Vanshanartana, the bamboo dance. There are many people, like even in the urban areas and rural areas, they will be just standing and then performing it on the roadside. What kind of skill, and there are many circus people, what kind of skill they have achieved where they can perform so many things at a time. Still, it will not be called Avadhanam because these skills are very mechanically achieved skill. When these skills are developed consciously in the human consciousness, and while developing, one follows a certain higher discipline, inner discipline, it helps in the expansion of the consciousness, human consciousness, and at the same time, it manifests many hidden potentialities which are lying dormant within the human consciousness. That's the beauty of the Avadhan art. That's the beauty of the Avadhan art. So just the current went off. So it will take maybe another 1 minute to come back. So my video will be looking blank. So this Avadhan, when we talk about the Avadhanam as an art, it's a very consciously developed art which demands much discipline, much tapasya. So every Avadhani, they may look like very ordinary people, but they are tapasvis, they are sadhaks. So our heartfelt pranam to those tapasvis who have preserved this tradition by putting their endeavor. Today, Avadhanam exists to a great extent in Andhra Pradesh, in Karnataka, and all those Avadhanis, whether they do it in the regional languages, in Telugu, Kannada, or in Sanskrit, but it is those, the whole credit of preserving this art goes to those few Avadhanis. So the entire world, the entire India must bow down before them, what they have preserved for their contribution. And this contribution must get a greater recognition in its own land, and the art is preserved. But at the same time, we have a tremendous amount of work to take the work forward. At present, when I looked at Avadhanam, when any Avadhan performance happens, so there is like someone who is not acquainted with Sanskrit, someone who is not acquainted with poetry, someone who is not acquainted with the Shastras, feels very much constrained. It gives the sense that maybe only few selected people, blessed people who are meant to do Avadhanam. We all do not have that capacity to do this Avadhanam. We need to, when we are talking about working on the Avadhanam, and if Avadhanam, for Avadhanam a center is established, its work must be how to bring Avadhanam, the principles of Avadhanam, into the day-to-day life in a conscious manner, in an educative manner, to the classroom where the children are helped in developing the multiple concentration faculty. It doesn't matter whether they will be performing Avadhanam or not, but they have the capacity of this multiple concentration. Their multiple concentration faculty is developed in them. So then they can concentrate, they can attend to multiple things without losing their attention. Even to a great extent, more accurately they can attend to and consciously attend to multiple things, whether whatever they're doing. It is not necessary that they have to be poets. It's not necessary that they have to know Sanskrit. It is not necessary that they have to know the Shastras or Shastric knowledge. Yet they have that capacity of concentrating their mind on multiple things. So the concentration is an immense power. In fact, concentration is the very key to anything that we want to achieve in life. Without concentration, progress is an impossibility. This is where Swami Vivekananda, when he talked about concentration, he said that, look, if I have to redo my schooling, redo my education, I would not go to school, I would not study anything. The only thing that I will do is I will develop my power of concentration. And once that power of concentration is developed in me, with that single power, I can study facts at will. And we know what tremendous amount of concentration power Swami Vivekananda had. And most of the yogis, they possess this power of concentration. And this concentration can be exclusive. This concentration can be multiple. This concentration can be integral. So yogis and rishis possessed the integral concentration ability, and most of the Avadhanis that we find, they possess the multiple concentration ability. And some of the talented people or genius people, also little in whom the mind is developed, they possess this power of single or exclusive concentration. It starts with that ekagra chittata, that one has to achieve. Now, Avadhanam, when we are talking about Avadhanam, there are three different shaktis which we need to focus and develop within as a part of the discipline. The Dharana Shakti, or Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, as we have put it as the title, the Smarana Shakti or Smriti Shakti, so Dharanasamarthya, Smarana Samarthya, and the Viveka Shakti. These three powers, Smarana, Dharana, and Vivejana. These three powers one needs to develop within. And it happens that for some people, because of their own sanskar, because of their own swabhava and swadharma, maybe it becomes very natural to them developing these shaktis. But it doesn't mean that there are only few people who can achieve anything that needs to be achieved for our progress, for our evolution, evolutionary progress or progressive evolution. Every human being has that in the potential form, in the seed form. By proper discipline, one can manifest such immense power or make that potential as a dynamic power, and then work effectively in the world with those developed power. So Dharana, Smarana, and Viveka Shakti. Swami Shivananda Saraswati, he has immense contribution in the field of spirituality, yoga, adhyatma. So in one of his books on mind, he says that for developing these three Shaktis, and these three are very, very central to the art of Avadhanam. And what is important as a discipline is that these three Shaktis can be developed within everyone by the power of Brahmacharya. This is that one discipline of a Brahmacharya. Now we need to discuss, there are orthodox views on what Brahmacharya is. There is a general understanding. But here I will focus a little bit on what the true Brahmacharya is. People may differ in their views, but I will present it here. So Brahmacharya, the physical continence or celibacy, is one aspect of a Brahmacharya. When we concentrate on the ashramas, we feel that Brahmacharya has to be practiced only during the Brahmacharya ashram, when I am Brahmachari, when someone is a Brahmachari. During that phase, during that ashram, Brahmacharya has its prominence and Brahmacharya. And once that Brahmacharya period is over, one enters into the Grihastha and follows the Garhastha Dharma, so Brahmacharya loses its importance. No. This is not the right understanding. So Brahmacharya must continue till the end. In every ashrama, it has to be followed intensely. This one single discipline must be followed intensely. Then that particular ashram, even the Grihasthashrama, can be a successful Grihasthashrama when Brahmacharya is followed as a discipline intensely, sincerely. Same applies to the Vanaprastha and the Sannyasa. So Brahmacharya has its significance in all the ashramas. When we talk like physical continence or the celibacy is just one aspect. But to give you a few examples, any unnecessary movement is a wastage of energy. If I'm speaking unnecessary words, because speaking itself is a movement and it needs tremendous amount of energy for speaking. And if I'm speaking unnecessary words which do not help, which bring disharmony, which are unnecessary, then there is a tremendous wastage of energy. To have a check on that, to have a check on our speech, if I take this sankalpa that whatever I speak, it is necessary and it helps, I'll speak only those words. If I take a sankalpa like this and I follow my discipline, I conserve much energy. Look at our unnecessary physical movement. Most of the times we do so many physical movements which are not necessary. Ask these questions. Am I doing the necessary movements for sitting, for sleeping, for walking, for doing any kind of thing? No. Do I have harmony in my physical movement? No. if that harmony is missing in my physical movement, and then I do so many unnecessary movements which are really not necessary for carrying out all my work, then there I'm wasting my energy. To put a discipline in harmonizing my physical movement, to put a discipline of not making unnecessary physical movement, that is how I conserve my energy. Look at how many unnecessary thoughts we have, how many unnecessary emotions that we have. Tremendous amount of thoughts go on in our mind, tremendous amount of unnecessary emotions we don't behind. To put a discipline on checking those unnecessary movements, controlling them, bringing harmony, allowing only what is necessary for our progression, is the discipline called brahmacharya, because that can put us in contact with the light, the truth, the purity that lies within ourselves, that can lead us towards the attainment of the perfection that we're aspiring, or the yoga aspires, or the education aspires, or the life aspires, or the nature is aspiring through its mechanical way. That is called brahmacharya. Celibacy, the physical continence, is just one aspect. So when we make it as a discipline of following and conserving the energy, then what do we do with that energy? How creatively we utilize that conserved energy is another discipline. So the power of creativity. And all these things we need to bring to our education system, which doesn't have. So for achieving these three Shaktis, Dharana Shakti, Smarana Shakti, Viveka Shakti, we need to have that inner discipline. And Dharana and Smarana. Dharana of what? Dharana of what is achieved by our Grahana Shakti. So there has to be the Dhāraṇāsāmarthya also, the power of receptivity. We do listen to so many things. We do see so many things. Our senses are engaged in receiving so many things. But we hardly have the capacity to do the Grahanam of that, because we lack that power of receptivity. Dhāraṇāsāmarthya. So this Dhāraṇāsāmarthya also needs to be developed, so then we receive the right information, we receive what is right, what is needed, what is necessary, what is good. And once we receive, the retention of that is the Dhāraṇāsāmarthya. This Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, every human being consciously making effort towards one's own progress. Actually, this is what is the real purpose of education. That education at present is just a mechanical activity of securing good marks and achieving certificates and then getting a good job. To a great extent, it's like that. And being in my job, I may perform well, I may not perform well, that is a different thing. But it's not a conscious process which helps in the expansion of the consciousness. So this is what we need to bring. This is the true Bharatiyata in the Bharatiya education, that it must be a conscious process, and all educational programs must be organized and then planned in a manner that it helps in the manifestation of the inner potential, all the different powers of the mind. So Dharanasamarthya is one samarthya of the mind, one power of the mind. And mind has various other powers. We talk about the power of concentration, the power of imagination, the creativity, reasoning, comprehension, logic. There are so many different powers that the mind has, where the mind needs to be developed. And in a developed mind, we find all these things. The left and the right both have to be harmoniously developed. Then the integral growth can take place. So some people say that, oh, he is a left brain kind of person, more analytic. Oh, he's a right brain person. He's more comprehensive, more creative kind of person. But a harmonious growth of both left and right. And this is what we find when we analyze the mind of an Avadhānī, how beautifully both the left and the right are well developed in the Avadhānīs. This is all Avadhānīs are the brightest examples of this simultaneous harmonious manifestation and the growth of the left and right brain. They're very analytic and they're very creative. Both the powers there, how harmoniously they have developed. This is where they have contributed immensely by following that discipline towards the progressive evolution of the humanity. That is why they, like we respect the rishis, the yogis, all Avadhānīs need to be respected. They're pratasmarani. I'm telling it because I feel that I respect in that manner all the Avadhānīs. So this Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, the Dharanasamarthya, and Smaranasamarthya, and the Viveka, which is connected with the Buddhi. There are certain powers which are connected with the mind, and the Viveka is connected with the Buddhi. Buddhi is Manasastu Parabuddhi. It is beyond the mind. Without the Viveka Buddhi, the manifestation of the Viveka, all our Dharanasamarthya, Smaranasamarthya, Grahanasamarthya, nothing will work properly if we do not have that Viveka Shakti manifest within us. And that's the Shakti which differentiates. It's not just the mind, not just the emotions, not just the speech, but the Viveka Buddhi which makes the man man. Otherwise, we have got all the characteristic features of the rest, the animals. Rather, in our ordinary consciousness, we are more animals than man. We are more vital than the mental. How we follow very mechanically our impulses, our instincts, the lower nature, everything that prompts, how we are trapped by the kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, all the shataripus. Every one of us were affected by that in our ordinary consciousness. And as long as we are trapped, affected by that, and then we have not set up the discipline for us, we cannot develop these beautiful powers within ourselves. The real progress will not happen. The real education will not happen. Now, while talking about the development of the different powers of mind, Dharana and Smarana, the power of retention and the power of recall. Power of recalling is the Smriti, the Smarana, and the power of retention is the Dharana. Both are connected with the memory, the human memory. So how do we develop this Dharanasamarthya? So as I mentioned, that this discipline of one single discipline of brahmacharya, but there are various ways of developing the different powers of mind, and so the Dharanasamarthya. There is, like for example, Kanthasthikarana, the repeated memorization of something. It's just one way of developing the Dharanasamarthya. concentrating the mind on single objects. So there are various disciplines, and especially in a very structured manner, the program for development of mind, the different powers of mind, it happens in the Jain tradition. And much of the Jain scriptures, they have very meticulously put forth the different disciplines different disciplines needed to develop the different powers of mind. So when we talk about the memory, there are different kinds of memory. Okay, the modern psychology will say pigeonhole memory, this memory, the what you call short-term memory, long-term memory. But in our tradition, in the traditional texts, we find tremendous study of the different powers of mind and so the power of memory. So how do we verify? How do we verify whether we have a good memory or not? There are different aspects connected with that. So one of the aspect of the memory is sugamata. Sugamata. Now, sugamata is something that one can remember easily something. Suppose you have read a passage, you have heard something. That's what you see during the performance of Avadhānam. Vasishtha Kavya Kantha Ganapati Muni was a great Avadhānī. And sometimes, later, if we have the time or in some other occasion also, I can speak only on the Avadhān aspect of Kavya Kantha Ganapati Muni. He was one of the greatest Avadhānis. So what is the Sugamata? Smriti, I give one example of Kavya Kantha Ganapati Muni. Like, he did not know English, but his power, his Dhāraṇāsāmarthya and Dharanasamarthya and Smaranasamarthya is such that if someone reads out or someone read out a passage from any English text, he could receive it, retain it, and reproduce it accurately or immediately, you can say. So and there are people, so this is an example of like in someone, the higher faculties are developed. But if I'm listening to a verse or listening to a passage, and I have developed little Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, I can recall that passage immediately, without losing much of it. So that is called the Sugamata. But if I am asked after some times, I may not be able to reproduce it because I have forgotten that. So this is where my power of retention comes to the role, that whatever I am receiving, how long I can retain in my mind. So then there is, and during the Sugamata, like whenever reproducing a passage immediately after hearing it, you may not be able to reproduce it accurately, but to a great extent you remember maximum. That's Sugamata. Then there is another stage where it also can be put into discipline called Avaikalya. Avaikalya means without distortion. So whatever is received is reproduced without losing it accurately. Accurately, it is reproduced. Then there is the third stage is called Dharana in the Smriti. So Dharana means like one has retained it for a long time. Suppose tomorrow someone asks me to reproduce it. And in the matter of Avadhanam, what I have observed, and I have interviewed few Avadhanis, to a great extent, Sugamata and Avaikalya are the two aspects of many Avadhanis. But so Dharana, retaining it for a long time. Suppose you ask an Avadhani who had performed an Avadhanam, say 3 months before or 1 year before. So whatever happened in the Avadhanam, there on the spot, the Avadhani could reproduce during the Dharana. So there, in the context of Avadhana performance, their Dharana is a reproduction of what is presented in separately in different rounds, because the audience, the viewers, they do not know what was the second line, what was the third line, what was the fourth line. Now during the Dharana stage, so Avadhani reproduces, recalls what he composed during the first round, what he composed in the second round for a particular question, for a particular item, whether samasya or dattapadi or varnanam. So in the Dharana stage, their Dharana means the reproduction of all that happened. Okay. And he is capable of reproducing it because he has retained it in his memory. Retention also has a role. But how long the Avadhani retains it in the mind? That's a question. So in the context of Sugamata, Avaikalya, and Dharana, many of the Avadhanis who have confirmed that it becomes difficult again to remember the same thing for a long time. In that moment, it is done. If they have kept it somewhere as a record, it's fine. Suppose an Avadhani has performed 100 Avadhana. He will not be able to retain the content that he himself created during the past 100 Avadhanams for a long time. It's not possible. But there is a possibility that someone can develop that capacity to retain to it. There's a possibility. So that possibility is known as upaharana. Upaharana means like one attains to that, one retains to that, and can reproduce accurately whenever it is needed. So these are the four aspects of the memory that Sugamata, Avaikalya, Dharana, and Upaharana. So here the Dhāraṇāsāmarthya is to retain something of what? Whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we receive through the different senses, and to develop and perfect the Dharana Shakti, the Dharanasamarthya. The first step towards that is the refinement of, or the purification of the senses, education of the senses. Without refining the senses, without being like samyatendriya, without bringing under control the indriyas, it is difficult to develop the Dharanasamarthya. I mean, all other samarthya also, but connected with Dharanasamarthya, because we work with the senses, because we receive, we are incapable of retaining it, recalling it, because we have not set that discipline. With the unrefined senses, we receive unrefined content and we receive inaccurate content. And if it has to be reproduced, then we reproduce inaccurately. So what is to be achieved by the education of senses, refinement of senses, is to develop the senses to such an extent that whatever we see it accurately. Whatever we hear accurately. Whatever we feel accurately. Whatever we smell accurately. Whatever we taste accurately. You can take examples that there are plenty. You can put yourself into the test and then check how far your senses are refined. There are many people who cannot say what are the different masalas in a sabji, in a curry. Whether dhania is there, pudina is there. Even people find it difficult to differentiate between pudina, dhania, the plain jira and the shahi jira, haldi and the mango ginger, and the ginger and the dry ginger. Because we have not developed our senses to that extent. And if you see, if those things are put before the Avadhānī, they will be accurately tell you what smell is coming and from which box. So in an Avadhānam, every aspect of human consciousness or human senses or connected with human mind, all the different powers are put into test. An Avadhānī can hear to different sounds, the sounds of different metals, the sounds of a bell of different sizes, different metals, and he has developed that the senses of hearing to that extent, and he has the capacity to differentiate between different sounds. Not only that he will receive the sound, he has that Dhāraṇāsāmarthya to retain it and reproduce it. Now here by Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, we say the retention of something which is received consciously. Otherwise, whatever we see, whatever we hear, we may not be conscious, but things are retained in our subconscious, in the chitta, which is the storehouse of everything. Suddenly you say that, I don't know, yesterday I had so many things in my dream. I've never even visited those places. So many things are happening in the dream. Where from it comes? It comes from that subconscious mind, where it is all stored. We may not be paying our attention to certain sounds, but the ear is open. Our senses are open outward. They keep whatever sounds are happening in the periphery, whatever things we are passing, we are walking, doing many things are happening. The senses do, receive those things, and it all gets stored in that subconscious mind. The active mind, it recalls, it can bring out things from the subconscious mind, whatever is it feels that it's necessary for me. So that is when we develop the Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, we can very consciously retain in our consciousness all that is necessary for ourselves. So then we can recall it afterwards. The smriti, the smaranam will not be perfect if the Dharanasamarthya is not properly developed. So in this manner, we see that in ancient time, they developed this power, and they were called, in another word, the Avadhanis are also can be called as Medhavis. Medha Shakti Sampanna. And that is what the definition, like it was mentioned right in the beginning, that Dharanavati Dhi is the Medha. When we say a student is Medhavi, we simply translate this word as a brilliant student. But it is Dharanavati Dhi has the power to retain it. And a student of Brahmachari was expected to be Grahana, Dharana, Patu. Grahana, Dharana, Patu. Grahana, Dharana, Patur, Bala. So Brahmachari is expected, and especially why so much of importance was given to the Brahmachari ashram, because it is during that time the different faculties develop. So this is where much care, much education has to happen when the faculties of the consciousness are developing. So Grahana, Dharana, Patuta was a most important aspect of our education to achieve that Patutva in Grahana and Dharana. Grahana, Dharana, Patu, Bala. And connected with this, when we look at the whole Jain tradition, how they have created, and it exists also, like every Jain monk is expected to practice the Saptasandhana. We call it Avadhāna here in general, but in the Jain tradition, the practice is called the Sandhana. So the deeper contemplation and concentration and the abhyas of that, so then this inner potentiality, the inner powers become manifest. So in the Jaina tradition, we see something which is called Samvyavaharika Pratyaksha, or the ordinary perception. So there, in that context, so it has 4 aspects. So the first aspect there is called avagraha. This avagraha means, say, when the sense has come in contact with an object, it has seen, or we have heard something, or something felt, something tasted. So any of the senses coming in contact, then there is, suppose there is an object, like say you see in the space something white or something yellow or something which is having color. So then the mind starts apprehending about the object, but doesn't have the details of that. But you just see some white color. That is the stage of avagraha, the first step in the perception. So you just see something, a bunch of, it's just white color or yellow color or red color, something like that. Then it starts apprehending. This apprehension about the object is called the avagraha, where there's no detail. And once this apprehension takes place, then there is a curiosity arises to know more about the object, what it could be. And that curiosity, that desire in the consciousness to know more about the object is the second stage, known as iha. Then there is a third stage. When this iha takes place, then there is an effort towards knowing the details. When the details are known, like suppose I see something is moving in the sky which looks white, then the curiosity is there, or the desire is there to know the iha stage, what it could be. And in the third stage, I have the determinate perception of the object. Now I know that, oh, it's a flock of cranes flying. So then I have the distinct perception of determinate perception of what it is. So when one knows exactly what the object is actually by observing all the aspects minutely, that stage is known as avaya. And when this definite and determinate perception takes place, when this object is definitely ascertained, then it creates the sanskara in the consciousness, impression. And that impression is called the dharana, the retention. Then it becomes easy to recollect. So dharana is a condition for recollection of the object. So if that definite perception is there, determinate perception is there, the avaya, then it is retained in the memory. So I can very easily at any point of time, and that's what happens to many of us, something which we have seen, which we have learned during our childhood days, still we remember. Something happens, but there are many other aspects which are involved in like how things remain powerfully in our consciousness, and then how powerful we recall it. It may be a very sad situation, it may be a very unhappy situation, it may be a very happy situation. There are both negative and positive sides of it. So then this is where the viveka shakti comes to the role. What is to be retained and recalled and what not? If someone wants the true progress in life, the true manifestation of the inner potentiality. So if that discipline is not followed, then right, so seeing right in front of one's own people in the world, so any Arjuna will fall into Vishada because he loses the Viveka Shakti. He has certain, his recollection of so many things at that stage, but he loses that Viveka. He loses, and when we lose that Viveka, we lose the whole memory of ourselves. So that is why he says, when towards the end, Arjuna says, Nashto moha smrutir labdha. I regained the memory of myself. Then one is ready to fight with the right attitude. So these are the few thoughts which I wanted to share connected with the Dharanasamarthya and especially connected with the Avadhāna parampara. So I'm extremely grateful for giving me this opportunity, and then I'll look forward to more opportunities for sharing my thoughts. Because I have worked a lot in the field of Avadhānam. Though I myself have not performed any Avadhānam, but I follow certain discipline, what most of the Avadhanis do follow as a part of our sanskar, as a part of our family tradition. And much needs to be done in the field of Avadhanam to make it practical and then bring it to our day-to-day life, and especially to the classroom situation where the multiple concentration faculty of the students can be developed. To make the Avadhanam free from the constraints of language, scholarship, poetry, and so many other things, but we can base our activities for the development of the multiple concentration faculties. The activities can be based on our tradition, the whole Sanskrit tradition. We have tremendous amount of content which we can utilize for creating so many different activities, which we can do it with the children. We can have different kinds of workshop modules through which we can promote and then help the Avadhanam grew. So, dhanyavads. If there are questions, I will address to that.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words were extremely enlightening, and there were many points which were much of a revelation for all of us, I'm sure. Now, we open the session for any questions which the participants may have. Kindly raise your hands so that we can know who's asking the question. Meanwhile, we have a question given in the chat box, sir. Shri Sunil Kumar, he's asking, do we have records of Avadhanam in the Vedic era or the classical age in which Sanskrit flowered, the Gupta era? Did the practices differ?
See, if you come to the practice of Avadhanam, yes, it was there, but not in the same format that we experience Avadhanam at present, or how it evolved. Every Veda learner is called Avadhānī. And among the Avadhanis, among these Veda learners, there were various kinds of games, various kinds of things, activities which prevailed while learning the Vedas, like the different kinds of questions would raise, like someone would recite a particular mantra and drop a particular word or a particular character. Because memorization, so to verify whether it is accurate or not, so there are many such activities which existed during that time. But as a literary feat, it developed later. But Avadhanam as a tradition, this developing the power of Avadhanam, then means concentrating the mind and having that right kind of attention and developing the memory, the grahana, Dhāraṇāsāmarthya, the smarana, viveka. So the discipline was very much there right from the beginning. But it developed, and there is mention of the different kinds of different components of Avadhanam in Vatsyayana's Kama Sutra. So, which is much ancient than many other Jain texts which deal with the different development of different powers of mind. Yes, Avadhanam as a discipline existed right from the Vedas till date, but Avadhanam as we experience the different kinds of Avadhanam, Sahitya Avadhanam, Sangita Avadhanam, Natya Avadhanam, or Ganita Avadhanam, Ayurveda Avadhanam, or the different aspects of Avadhanam, as it developed, those we do not have any record in the same format, but it did exist in some format for which there are records. Different components of Avadhanam which are used, like Samasya, Akshara Mushtikam. So there are different components of Avadhanam did exist in its time. Later it developed to the feat kind of thing in different subjects. Yeah.
Mehtaji, you may please proceed with your question.
Greetings, sir. You mentioned a book on mind by Swami Shivanand. What is the title of that book? What is that book?
The title of the book, I think, Mind and Its Power.
Okay.
Mind and Its Power by Swami Shivananda Saraswati. It should be available on the internet.
Thank you.
Shri Janardhan Iyer ji.
Namaste, Sampadananda ji.
Namaskar.
As you explained, that brahmacharya is the stage where the faculties are developed by cultivating various qualities. But in today's time, those who have crossed the brahmacharya stage, somewhere of grahastha ashrama or maybe between grahastha and vanaprastha, is there any hope for them if they would like to devote themselves to the development of dharana qualities?
Hope is yes, definitely. There is though in the initial phase, like the faculties develop, but it doesn't, get stagnated at any point of time. Human consciousness is such that at any point of time, any faculty can be developed by putting certain disciplines. Of course, which becomes easier. So here we need to have more intense and sincere discipline, following of the discipline for developing. But it never gets stagnated that where you can't do anything. Maybe some diseases or something happens, accident happens, that's a different thing. But human consciousness is an evolutionary consciousness. So at any time it can be evolved. So it moves forward. So as we move forward, various aspects of our, various powers of our consciousness, it starts coming to the front. So they are the hidden potential. And for that, no age is barrier. Like what even sometimes doesn't happen in one life, it happens in the next life. But as the human consciousness is the soul in evolution, we say, okay, we're evolutionary beings. We're not typal beings. We're evolutionary beings. So at any point of time, any faculties can be developed by following strictly the discipline needed for its manifestation or development.
Dhanyawada, Mohoday.
Hari Om Sundaraji.
See?
Sir, we can utilize this smarana, dharana, and this our avadhana sort of things for kids having ADHD traits, no? So that they can be helped out.
Right. So wherever one wants to apply it, implement it for the growth of mind, for one's own progress, it can be implemented. And
what should be the practically, what should be the step we have to evolve, sir, for if we adopt in the small kids having this ADHD set of traits, because they won't be having that much of concentration part initially.
Yes, see, thing is there are various aspects like when, so for example, like you deal with the special children. Okay. So you have to see what are the, because there are various aspects. Simply calling a special child, there are different syndromes, different kinds of things. So different things can be applied to looking at the problem there. So for some people, like I have worked with some of the special children, applying, like the mantra yoga. So mantra works immensely, music works immensely. Even sometimes the drawing, painting, all these things work immensely. Yoga practice. So there are different therapies which are developed, which are utilized for the special children. So whatever is available in our tradition can offer immensely towards it. So I utilize mostly the power of mantra, the power of sound, for rectification of many things.
So sir, I have conducted some sort of study in this field or some okay, sir.
Sorry, can you
if it is a mild MR sort of thing, and if it is some sort of mild mental retardation sort of MR sort of thing and all, I think I don't know means up to what extent we can be able to explore it. But obviously, I feel like behavior aspect, kids having this what we'll call aggressive nature and all. At that time, I think we can utilize it in a better way.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Uma Ayerji.
Namaste, Mishra ji. It was a wonderful session. So thank you very much. I have a doubt which I've had for some time. You spoke about our culture, our ancient culture, where we have the Dharana, the Grahana, and the Smarana. And this tradition has been where a lot of memorization and understanding and contemplation has been emphasized upon for centuries. And when you cut down to the present age, we have people decrying the aspect of rote learning in schools, which goes in the name of modern education. So there are people who decry it and consider this to be a complete waste of time. And because the children do not seem to retain anything and just pass exams, and it goes on and on for a long time. Where is a disconnect in both these things? I'm unable to, I understand where you're coming from in terms of the ancient aspects which were emphasized upon in the Indian tradition. It has now degenerated into what we have now, and the basics of discipline, etc., is completely missing. What is your comment on this? How would you react? I just want to understand your view on it.
See, Kanthasthikaran is just one aspect, not the whole of, not everything. Okay. And sometimes the Kanthasthikaran is not necessary also, because especially the present day children, the millennials, they have a deeper connection with the higher consciousness. Okay. For some people, Kanthasthikaran can be applied, but what works exactly? A repetition of what? It is the rhythm which helps immensely in the preparation or preparing the ground for the memory. It's a powerful aid to the memory rhythm. So that's what when we do the Kanthasthikaranam, there is certain amount of rhythm in the, whether we are doing the Kanthasthikaranam of a prose, and mostly in Sanskrit in our oral tradition. Why it became very powerful? Because that music, that melody, that rhythm is very, very natural to Sanskritam. Very natural to Sanskritam. You can say like above 90% literature is in poetry. Here you have dictionaries in poetry, mathematics in poetry, chemistry is in poetry. People say, oh, dictionaries are in poetry. Yes, look at all the koshas, Alayudha kosha, Medini kosha, Purushottama kosha, Trikanda Shesha. So in any kosha, Amara kosha, it's all in poetry. Because it's easy. The rhythm helps the memory. So if someone is not, it is not necessary to impose Kanthasthikaranam or rote learning on anyone, but the rhythm aspect can be brought through various means. So music helps, painting, drawing also helps, because they are all rhythmic. If someone is interested in the nature, observing the nature also it helps. Look at how the cloud formation takes place. It has so beautiful rhythm in it. How birds fly, how insects crawl, how the plants grow, what kind of symmetry and proportion you find in the nature. So being in contact with the nature is also another powerful way of developing these inner powers. So a rote learning is not a solution to or not the only power, you can say, or only means for developing the dharana and smarana. So what happens usually is a great amount of mechanical aspect develops. So it becomes a mechanically achieved skill. So there are people, like I have seen some of my friends, the entire Amara Kosha, entire Panini is in their memory. But it's just a storehouse where they are just producing it. But they are unable to implement or apply that, what they have retained, in any aspect. The most unproductive people I have seen, but they have a great memory where they have stored the entire Amara Kosha, the entire thing. They're not productive people. Whereas there are people, they have not memorized things, but they're very productive. They can implement those things very productively, very creatively. So there is always a risk in Kanthasthikaranam, in rote learning, to fall into the attainment of that skill in a very mechanical way, and falling into the trap of this unproductive, stagnant kind of state. And there are plenty. So that is why Viveka Shakti is very much necessary along with Grahana and Dharana.
Thank you.
May I ask a
Yeah,
question?
please.
So, in my experience, as in Avadhanams, so if it is composed, so why I can remember those verses that I composed? It is because of the meters. Since it is composed in classical meters, I can remember, and even some of the texts also, or some of the verses also, or some of the theories also. Not only with respect to poetry, even the works of Leelavati or the Indian mathematics texts or Indian astronomics. So since these are composed in classical meters, I can remember it. And if I can give a lighter example, if my wife gives a list of some items to bring from the shop, so if I just see the items, then I forget one or two things. But if I compose all 10 or 12 items are there, while going, if I compose all those items in Indra Vajra or Shalini, I will be able to remember these things. So now, and this, I strongly believe that this is the reason that all our, even not only the poetry or not only these texts, even the natural science texts also have been composed in classical meters. So you mentioned about the education also in your speech. So can we now, what we are missing is, can we now the texts of some primary level or those texts, can we write those texts in some kind of, I'm not saying that classical meters, if something has some kind of rhythm, so whether those things benefit the students in Dharana or in Smarana. I have seen that one mathematics lecturer of Karnataka, he is actually all the formulas or something, he is actually composing in Kannada meters like Bhamini Shatpadi or Panchamatra Chaupadi and all. And he is saying that his students are enjoying those things also. While teaching, he gives these also. He's what he said. So what is your take on this?
Yeah. See, the science is not taught, or by studying science, everyone becomes a scientist, right? So the science must be taught in order to develop the scientific temperament, right? So when we are talking about the chandas, the rhythm is important. And the rhythm is not confined to poetry. That when we talk chandas, usually we relate it to poetry. The moment you say chandas, it's poetry. But for me, it's very different. The chandas is universal. This whole world is filled in with chandas. Without chandas, no creation is possible. Chandobhya eva vishwamidam vyavartata. I feel the chandas in my heartbeat. I feel the chandas in my pulse. I feel the chandas in my breath. I feel the chandas when I sit in front of the ocean. I feel the chandas in the movement of the waves. I feel the chandas when I look at a bird flying. I feel the chandas when a snake is moving. That must have inspired our rishis to recognize the pattern as Bhujanga Prayatam or Shardula Vikriditam or Vanshapatra Patitam. Every name of the chanda is connected with something that exists in the nature. So what is important is not to compose things, everything into poetry, but to make music natural to one's own consciousness. If I can develop that sensibility, if I can have that rhythm in my consciousness, that rhythm in my physical, that rhythm in my thoughts, so then when I think rhythmically. When I have emotions, there is music in it. When I speak, I have music in my speech. So to develop that sense, like we talk about aesthetic sensibility, that rhythmic sensibility needs to be developed. So that is why, like when we develop that power of music, that power of rhythm in our consciousness, we grow more and more aware of that chandas, the presence of chandas in everything and being. That will be a greatest attainment than just composing everything into poetry, but it has its practical value when we are setting it up as a discipline and putting our effort in empowering our memory. That can be one of the stages in the first stage. But ultimately, through that, through the rote learning, as Umaji was pointing out this question. So through rote learning, if the purpose can be to develop that power of rhythm in us. So if one has that rhythm, so one automatically is open to the forces which can help in developing the grahana, dharana, smarana, vivechana, samarthya. So that is why chandas is so important so central to our whole tradition, even the adhyatma tradition, every tradition that we have. It is so central. So it is because, and that chandas is the rhythm, because in chandas, everything has to be in order. Yatha tathyato arthan vedadhat saswatibhya samabhya. So this proper order, it is because of the chandas, the planets orbit. It is because of the chandas, the seasons come one after another. And whenever there is a collapse at the cosmic level of the chandas, we have natural disasters, tsunami, earthquake, because of that disharmony in the cosmos. When there is a loss of that chandas at the individual level, when we are not in tune with our own music, we are not swastha, then we fall sick. So that is why go to Ayurveda, it will say the reason of all sickness is the disharmony. So samarasata is the cause of all swasthata. That's why our Devi, Lalita Devi, is worshipped as Samarasya Parayana. Why do we worship with that name? To establish that harmony, that music, that rhythm, that proportion, that symmetry. And wherever there is harmony, wherever there is proportion, there is symmetry, there is beauty. And attaining to this, we make our life beautiful. We experience the beauty in everything if there is harmony. And the music has a tremendous role in playing, a tremendous role to play in developing this sensibility. To become aware of one's own music, rhythm. That is important. Of course, in the beginning, all kinds of things can help, but we should make it a means, not an end itself, or the only thing that can help.
Thank you.
Hari Om. I have a doubt.
Yeah.
During
sorry for interrupting. So it is 7:34. So this could be the last question. So after that, we will conclude this discussion. Yes, over to you, Ravindranath.
During the stage of reception of something knowledge new, how to discriminate with what is to be retained and what is not to be retained.
Yeah,
so many things are coming.
Yeah, that is where, like, if we have the Viveka Shakti, we know what is necessary for us or what is not necessary for us. And in general, we all have a little bit of that. Like, suppose I'm doing something, a particular work, and I know that the information that I am receiving are necessary for achieving this work. So I know that, then I will retain that. I will not retain something which will not help me in my present work. So it depends upon like what you are doing, and then what is necessary for that purpose. So whatever is necessary for the cooking, and then I will receive those things while cooking, or if my purpose is cooking, so I will not retain something which is necessary for digging.
That's true, but
so one has to be clear about the purpose. So once one is clear about the purpose, say for example, like if I am very clear about the very purpose of my life, I can organize things around that purpose. Then I know, and slowly I develop that Vivek Shakti, what is necessary for my purpose, what is not necessary. There are many things which will keep coming, which are not necessary. So that is why Vivek Shakti is important, that we have to, and it's not a stage, like they're all simultaneous while developing the Dharana Shakti. So the Vivek Shakti, it is not that okay, after developing my Dharana and Smarana, if I have time, I'll develop Vivek Shakti. It's not a stage, it's all simultaneous process in us.
But in some cases, certain knowledge may become useful at a later stage, though at that particular time it may not be useful.
So, one can keep it in the store, and then when it is necessary, the active mind can recall it.
Okay, that is right. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, participants, for raising equally illuminating questions and giving us the opportunity to interact with Sri Mishra ji. Now I request the director of our Center for Avadhanam, Dr. Ramakrishna Pejattaya ji, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mridula ji. Idam tavat katinam karma vachanani aparyaptani bhavanti tathapi aham yatishye. So first of all, my humble gratitude to Dr. Sampadananda Mishra ji for his wonderful talk, and the questions the questions have been raised by the participants, and the discussion what happened after the talk. So it only indicates that how engaging this talk was. So I think those discussions only indicate that how how important and how valuable this talk was. So I think much words are not required. So my humble gratitude to Dr. Sampadananda Mishra ji, and I request him to be with us and to be with our Center for Avadhanam. And he has done a lot of work on Avadhanam, and he has submitted his report also to the Ministry of Culture. So with this request, once again, I convey my humble gratitude to Sampadananda Mishra ji. Bhuyishtante nama uktim vidheyama. And it is the participants who have made this session very engaging with their questions and with the valuable discussions. So I thank all the participants for their participation and the questions that they have raised. And many of our CVV faculty have joined this session. I can see some names here, Saurabh Singanapalli ji and Venkataraghavan ji, and many others also had joined earlier. Swami Advayanand ji was also there, and Professor Gauri Mahurikal ji, and many faculty have joined earlier. So my sincere gratitude to all my colleagues and our staff and many other, and our CVV staff and many other also have joined this session, and they have helped us to conduct this session successfully, especially the IT team and the media team of Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit. They are always with us, with their support. So my gratitude to them. And Chinmaya Vishwa, the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar, Dean of Faculty, all are supportive to our all initiatives and activities. And then especially I must mention the Indic Academy for their financial assistance for all our activities. And my humble gratitude to the officials of Indic Academy also. And our Mridula Ashwinji, she coordinated the event and she anchored the session very nicely. So for and to Mridula Ashwinji also my sincere gratitude. So with this, let us conclude this session. So over to you, Mridula ji.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pejatayaji, for offering the vote of thanks. There were a few questions that were left unanswered due to paucity of time. We request you to kindly mail any of your queries to the mail ID avadhanam@cvv.ac.in. We shall get them answered shortly. Let us conclude this session with Mangalacharanam. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.